The dog was trembling in my arms, its wiry fur prickling against my cheek, while 3 men circled like wolves. Their laughter was sharp, cutting through the cold evening air, and every step they took closed the gap between us. I had nowhere to run. "Put it down, sweetheart. Dogs don't like liars," one of them said, smirking as he reached out. My legs felt like stone, but my arms tightened around the dog's small body. I could hear its fast, panicked heartbeat against mine, and I swear my own matched it beat for beat. I wasn't scared of dogs. I was scared of men like them, the kind that looked at a girl alone on a roadside and thought it was their business. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but headlights cut across the dark road, slicing through the scene. A black SUV rolled to a stop behind us. A man stepped out. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He simply looked at them, tall and steady, his voice low and even. "Walk away." Something in his tone made even the loudest of the 3 flinch. One of them muttered something under his breath, but they backed off, peeling away into the shadows like smoke on wind. The stranger turned to me. His eyes were calm, almost too calm, like nothing we just witnessed had surprised him. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head, hugging the dog closer, though my arms were shaking. He glanced at the dog, then at me. "Does it belong to you?" "No, I found him." "They were?" I couldn't finish. He nodded once, then held out a hand, not to touch me, but to take the dog. "He's scared. You are too. Let's get you both out of here." There was something about the way he said it, matter of fact yet oddly gentle, that made my resistance collapse. I followed him to the SUV, still holding the dog because I wasn't ready to let go. Inside, it smelled like leather and faint coffee. Warmth flowed from the vents, chasing away the chill that had wrapped around me for days, maybe weeks. He adjusted the mirrors, started driving, and for a while neither of us spoke. Only when my hand stopped trembling did he ask, "What's your name?" "Jenna. Jenna Myers. I'm Ethan Cole." He didn't look at me, eyes fixed on the road. "Where were you headed?" The answer caught in my throat. I had nowhere. Not anymore. Just away. He didn't push. He didn't even glance at me to judge my vagueness. Instead, he pointed to the dog curled against my lap, already asleep. "You keeping him?" I almost laughed, the sound rough and uneven. I don't even have a place for myself, let alone for him. "Then maybe tonight you both do," he said simply, taking an exit off the main road. The highway lights faded as trees gathered around us, tall and whispering. I glanced at him, unsure why I trusted a man I just met. But the fear I'd felt minutes ago was gone, replaced by something stranger, a fragile kind of safety. We pulled up to a gated property. Beyond it, a house stood like a piece of glass dropped into the wilderness. Modern angles, large windows, and quiet power. He opened the gate with a remote and drove through. "You can stay in the guest house. It's separate from mine. No one will bother you there," he said, his tone more factual than kind, as if kindness was too obvious to name. I followed him inside, clutching the dog, stepping into warm light and polished wood. For a moment I couldn't speak. I had been ready to spend the night on a bench at a train station, and instead I was standing in a stranger's guest house, safe. "Lock the door from inside when I leave. Tomorrow we'll talk about what you need. Food's in the fridge, towels in the bathroom." He set a set of keys on the counter, then paused. "You look like someone who hasn't had one good night's sleep in a long time." I swallowed hard, not because he was wrong, but because it felt like he'd seen straight through me. "Thank you. I mean it." He nodded and walked out, leaving me with the quiet hum of heating and the soft breathing of the dog now curled on the floor. I slid to the edge of the bed, hands still shaking. But for the first time in weeks, it wasn't from fear, it was from relief. I didn't know who Ethan Cole really was or why he'd stopped for me. All I knew was that for tonight, I wasn't alone, and that felt like a miracle I hadn't earned. When I finally closed my eyes in that guest house bed, I thought sleep would come fast, but it didn't. Memories have a way of creeping in when the world goes quiet. I wasn't running away because I wanted adventure. I was running because I had nowhere left to go. I grew up in a small apartment above a hardware store. Just me and Mom for most of my childhood. Dad left when I was 5. No dramatic farewell. Just a note on the counter and a bank account emptied to the last cent. Mom cried for weeks, then hardened like stone. She worked double shifts at the hospital. Always tired, always on edge. But she made sure I had what I needed. When I was 17, she met Mark. He was polite at first, too polite. He brought flowers, washed dishes after dinner, laughed at all the right jokes. I wanted to like him, if only for Mom's sake. She deserved someone to love her back. But over time, his tone sharpened like knives you don't notice until they cut. Mark didn't like me. I don't know if it was because I reminded him I was part of Mom's life before him, or because I wouldn't just vanish into my room every time he came home. He started small comments about how I left my shoes by the door, how the fridge was always empty, how I never did enough to help. I was helping. I always had. At 16, I worked weekends at a cafe saving for college while taking care of our bills whenever Mom fell short. I studied accounting because she said it was safe, stable, something that would keep me from repeating her mistakes. I listened even when it chipped at my own dreams. I loved art, pencils, charcoal, color smudges on my hands, but I buried it. I buried me. When I turned 21, I thought things might finally settle. I'd finished community college, lined up interviews, paid off some of Mom's medical debt without her even knowing. But Mark was still there, still picking at every threat of my life. The last fight started over something so stupid, it almost feels unreal now. I'd made dinner, pasta, nothing fancy. But apparently I used the wrong pan, he shouted. I shouted back. Then he said, "The one thing I can't unhear, you're just like your father, useless and ready to run when things get hard." I froze. Mom didn't. She slammed her hand on the table and told me to apologize to him. To him, as if his words were truth, carved in stone. I grabbed my bag, threw in a couple of clothes, my sketchbook, and what little cash I had. Mom followed me to the door, eyes wide, mouth open like she might say something, but she didn't. She just let me go. I took the bus to the station and bought the cheapest ticket north, thinking maybe Dad would take me in. Even after all these years, I'd heard he was in Washington working some seasonal construction job, living with a new family. I didn't have his phone number, only an address scribbled on a Christmas card he once sent when I was 13. When I finally got there, tired and freezing, a woman opened the door. She had 2 little boys clinging to her legs, hair messy from a long day. She looked at me like she knew who I was, and then she said it. "He's not here. He's up north weeks at a time. And honestly, he's moved on. I'm sorry." She was kind enough to let me sleep on their couch one night, but in the morning she asked me not to come back. It wasn't cruel, just final. So I kept moving one town to the next, looking for anything. A job, a couch, a break. Instead, I got chased down by strangers with nothing better to do on a cold evening. And that's when Ethan appeared. Lying there in his guest house, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safe. But safety is dangerous when you're used to fighting for every scrap of it. Part of me whispered not to trust it. People help because they want something, right? That's what Mark always said. Still, there was something about Ethan's voice, steady, and unbothered, like someone who doesn't need anything from you at all, someone who just shows up. Maybe tomorrow I'd thank him properly. Maybe I'd leave before I overstayed. But tonight, wrapped in warmth I hadn't earned, I let my eyes finally close. And for the first time in weeks I slept. I woke up to sunlight streaming through tall windows, warm and golden, like it had been waiting just for me. For a moment I didn't know where I was. Then I saw the dog curled at the foot of the bed and remembered. Ethan, the SUV, the guest house. The dog's tail thumped when I stirred. "Morning, buddy," I whispered, rubbing his head. His whole body wiggled like he'd just won the lottery. For all I knew, maybe he had. We both had. I showered in water that didn't take 3 minutes to warm up, used a towel that didn't smell like bleach from a laundromat, and stood in front of the little kitchenette, wondering what to do next. Leave. Stay. Until he told me to go. I wasn't used to kindness with no strings attached. A knock came at the door. My pulse jumped, but when I opened it, it was just Ethan, jeans, gray t-shirt, hair still damp like he'd come straight from his own shower. He looked less intimidating in daylight, though his eyes were the same. Calm, measuring, like he carried his own storms, but didn't let them spill on anyone else. "You sleep?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, better than in a long time." "Good. You hungry?" I hesitated. Accepting food felt like accepting a favor I'd have to repay a little. He stepped back. "Come to the main house when you're ready, and bring him." He pointed at the dog, now wagging his tail like crazy. Breakfast was eggs, bacon, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. I ate slow, aware of how surreal it all felt. Me, a stray girl with a stray dog sitting in a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine. When I finished, Ethan pushed a folder across the counter. "This is a job description. I need someone to keep the place running. Laundry, cleaning, cooking when you feel like it. Nothing crazy. Pay spare, and you can stay in the guest house rentrée as long as you want." I blinked. "You're offering me a job? You need one?" "I need someone I can trust." His voice was steady, like it was no big deal, like offering work and housing to a stranger was just Tuesday for him. "But you don't even know me." He shrugged. "I know you picked up a dog and held your ground against 3 guys twice your size. That's enough character reference for me." I stared at him, not sure whether to laugh or cry. "I'm not a housekeeper. I mean, I can cook and clean, but good enough," he cut in. "You'll figure it out if you want it." I should have said no. I should have thanked him and walked out before things got complicated. But when I looked out the window toward the guest house, sunlight spilling across the grass like a welcome mat, I couldn't. "Okay," I whispered. "I'll do it." Something softened in his expression. Just for a second, like a cloud parting. "Great. You start today. There's a credit card for groceries, supplies. I'll show you where everything is." By noon, I had my own set of keys, a closet stocked with cleaning supplies, and a refrigerator that actually belonged to me. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was mine. For the first time since leaving home, I wasn't drifting. That night, after scrubbing countertops and folding laundry I hadn't worn, I sat on the guest house porch with the dog, who I'd named Lucky, and watched the sun drop behind the trees. The quiet felt different here, safe, not lonely. I still didn't know why Ethan Cole had stopped for me that night, why he trusted me enough to offer a job and a roof over my head. Maybe he was one of those rare people who helped without keeping score. Or maybe he was lonely too. Either way, for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't dared to hope for. Maybe I'd landed somewhere I could stay, at least for a little while. The first week passed in quiet routine. Morning coffee with Lucky wagging his tail at my feet. laundry humming in the background, the soft smell of pine trees slipping through the windows. I hadn't realized how much I craved ordinary days, the kind where no one yelled, where silence wasn't punishment, but peace. Ethan kept his distance, which surprised me. I had expected some hidden condition, some reason he'd taken me in, but he didn't ask questions beyond the basics, didn't hover, didn't pry. He just let me work. The main house was sleek and modern, but somehow warm, filled with natural wood and sunlight. My favorite place to clean was the glass-walled living room overlooking the forest. Sometimes, when no one was looking, I'd stand there with a cloth in my hand and breathe. Just breathe. It felt like standing inside a painting, and maybe that's what sparked it, the urge I hadn't felt in years. I dug out my old sketchbook from the bottom of my bag one evening. The cover was frayed, pages curled from travel, but it still smelled faintly of graphite and old dreams. I sharpened the one pencil I had left and started to draw. First Lucky curled up on the porch, then the row of fir trees outside, then the guest house itself. My hands remembered even when my mind had forgotten. Lines flowed easily, shapes turning into life. I lost hours to it, so much that when I finally looked up, night had settled over the property, and I'd missed dinner completely. The next morning I found Ethan standing at the porch railing, holding one of my sketches. I froze, heat rushing to my face. "This yours?" he asked, turning the paper so the early light showed every pencil mark. "Yes. Sorry. I don't apologize." He looked at it for another moment, then at me. "You're good. Really good." I shrugged, uncomfortable. "It's just a hobby. I was supposed to be an accountant. Safe job, good pay, stable." His mouth tilted just slightly. "You sound like someone repeating what they were told to want." I didn't answer, because he was right. That night, he came back from town with something under his arm. Set of sketch pencils and a pad of paper, crisp and new ear, simply setting them on the counter. "I can't accept this. You're working. You're earning. Call it in advance on your paycheck." My throat tightened, the kind of tight that comes when gratitude is so sharp it hurts. "Thank you." He nodded once and went upstairs, leaving me staring at the clean white pages like they were some kind of doorway. Maybe they were. Over the next weeks, I filled them, Lucky sleeping by the fireplace, the way morning mist clung to the tree-ine, even once. Just his silhouette against the kitchen window as he poured coffee. He never said much about the drawings, but every now and then I'd catch him glancing at one with a look I couldn't quite name. And me, I was changing. I wasn't just cleaning a house. I was building something inside myself I'd thought was gone. The fear I'd carried from my mom's apartment, from Mark's words, from every closed door on the road, it loosened. Slowly, quietly one night, as I sketched Lucky with his head on my lap, I realized I hadn't thought about leaving in days. I hadn't rehearsed excuses or mapped bus routes or counted how many dollars I had left. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't surviving. I was living. It had been almost a month since that night on the roadside. I had slipped into a rhythm. Early mornings with coffee and Lucky afternoons cleaning. Evenings sketching by the big glass window while the forest whispered outside. For the first time in a long time, life felt safe. And then she arrived. I was in the kitchen kneading bread dough for dinner when I heard the sound of tires on gravel. A sleek, silver car I'd never seen before stopped outside the main house. A woman stepped out tall, elegant, the kind of beauty you see in magazines. Hair glossy and perfect, heels clicking against the stone walkway. She didn't belong here in the quiet woods. She belonged somewhere loud, where people looked at her just to feel small. Ethan was on the porch when she approached. I couldn't hear what she said at first, but I saw him stiffen slightly. like someone bracing for bad weather. He led her inside. Something in my chest tightened, an ache I didn't have a name for. I told myself it didn't matter. Why would it? I was just the help, the girl who scrubbed floors and folded laundry. Whatever Ethan's life was beyond this property had nothing to do with me. Still, I couldn't stop my feet from moving closer, pausing just outside the dining room door where their voices carried. "Don't pretend you don't know why I'm here," she said, her tone smooth, almost sharp. "You're wasting your time with her. Jenna's none of your business, Elena." Ethan's voice was steady, but colder than I'd ever heard it. "She's living on your property, playing house while you—" She stopped, probably noticing the shift in his eyes. "I'm just saying you have a reputation. People will talk." There was a silence long enough to make my skin prickle. "Let them," Ethan said finally. "You don't get to tell me who I help." Elena scoffed. "Help? That's what you call it." That was enough. I stepped back, heart pounding, and hurried to the guest house before they could see me. My hand shook so badly I nearly dropped the mixing bowl. Help. That's all this was to him. I knew I should be grateful. I had a roof, a job, safety. I owed him more than I could ever repay. But hearing her words felt like being back in that apartment with Mark telling me I'd never be enough. Mom looking away because it was easier than choosing sides. That night, I barely touched dinner. Ethan didn't say anything, though he noticed. I could tell by the way he lingered in the doorway longer than usual, eyes narrowing slightly, like he wanted to ask but decided against it. Later, I packed a small bag just in case. I'd learned not to stay anywhere too long, not to let roots take hold where they weren't welcome. But before I could zip it closed, there was a knock. Ethan stood there, one hand on the door frame, expression unreadable. "Alanina's gone," he said simply. I nodded, avoiding his eyes. She made some good points. Maybe I shouldn't stop. His tone left no room for argument. "She doesn't speak for me. You're not going anywhere unless you want to understand." I swallowed hard. "Why would you defend me? You barely know me." His gaze softened just slightly. "Because I know enough. You work hard, you don't take handouts, and you've brought life back into this place. Don't let one bitter voice chase you out." I didn't answer, because I didn't trust my voice not to crack. Instead, I nodded and sat down on the edge of the bed, feeling like my chest might cave in from relief and something else I didn't want to name yet. Lucky curled against my feet as if agreeing we weren't going anywhere. Not tonight. 2 days passed after Alina's visit, and things felt different. Ethan wasn't avoiding me, but there was a heaviness in his eyes I hadn't seen before, like he'd been carrying a weight I couldn't name. He still left early for work, still came home late, but now he lingered more, asking how my day was, what I'd drawn, whether Lucky had chewed another pair of boots. One evening, just as I was drying dishes, he stepped into the kitchen, cleared his throat, and leaned against the door frame. "Can we talk?" I set the plate down carefully because his tone wasn't casual. "Sure. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. It's about my parents." He paused, eyes drifting to the floor before meeting mine again. "They're coming to visit this weekend. It's complicated." I tilted my head. "Complicated how?" He hesitated. "My dad's health isn't great. Heart issues, and my mom worries about me, about him, about everything. I haven't exactly given them a reason to stop worrying." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "They think I'm alone too much. They've wanted me to settle down, start a family." His mouth quirked as if he were laughing at himself. "This visit, they'll be pushing that again, and I don't want Dad stressing." I didn't see where this was going. "So, what do you need from me?" He took a deep breath, straightening his shoulders like he was about to negotiate a multi-million-dollar deal. I want you to pretend to be my fiancé, just for the weekend. The dish towel slipped from my hand. Your what? My fiancé. It doesn't have to be dramatic, just enough so my parents believe I'm happy, that I'm building a life. They'll go home relieved and Dad won't worry himself sick. I stared at him, waiting for him to laugh, to say it was a joke. He didn't. You want me, your housekeeper, to suddenly be your fiancé? His jaw tightened slightly. You're more than a housekeeper, Jenna. And yes, I'm asking you because I trust you and you. You make this place feel alive again. My cheeks burned. I turned away, fumbling with the towel. Ethan, this is crazy. What if they see through it? What if I mess up? You won't. You're honest and you care about people. That's all they need to see. The silence stretched. My mind raced. Images of me smiling awkwardly next to Ethan while his mother eyed me. His father wondering who I was. Every instinct told me to say no. I'd spent most of my life trying not to stand out, and this would put me directly in the spotlight. But then I saw something in Ethan's expression, an edge of vulnerability, like he hated asking but needed to anyway. And maybe, just maybe, I wanted to help him the way he'd helped me. I exhaled slowly. Fine, I'll do it. But if this backfires, I'm blaming you. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Deal. That night he told me about his childhood, how his dad taught him to fish at the Columbia River, how his mom knitted scarves for every winter, how their tiny house in the coastal town still smelled like cedar and salt water. He hadn't been home as much since his company grew, and guilt laced every word when he talked about it. Listening to him, I realized this wasn't just about keeping his parents happy. It was about him trying to make up for lost time, to give them peace when he couldn't be there as much as they deserved. And I couldn't help but think, this man who saved me on a dark road, who gave me work and safety, now trusted me to save him in return, even if it was just an act. When he handed me a small jewelry box the next day, a simple silver band to make it convincing, my fingers trembled as I slid it onto my left hand. It was supposed to be pretend, but as I looked at my reflection, a strange thought whispered through me. What if it didn't feel like it? The day Ethan's parents arrived, the air around the house felt different, like it had been holding its breath all morning. I stood by the window, smoothing the front of the soft blue dress Ethan had picked out for me, feeling like a stranger in my own skin. Lucky sat by my feet, tilting his head as if to say, "You sure about this?" "No," I whispered back, even though I smiled at him. Ethan walked in, freshly shaven, wearing a button-down I'd only ever seen hanging untouched in his closet. He stopped for a second, looking at me. Not a long stare, not dramatic, but long enough for heat to rise in my cheeks. "You look perfect," he said quietly, then cleared his throat and straightened his cuffs like he hadn't just said that. Before I could respond, tires crunched on the driveway. A silver sedan appeared and outstepped a woman with kind eyes and a scarf wrapped around her neck, followed by a man with silver hair and a careful, slow walk. "Ready?" Ethan asked. I nodded, gripping the simple silver band on my left hand, the one he'd given me to sell the story. My pulse drummed in my ears as we stepped outside. "Mom, Dad, this is Jenna," Ethan said, and his hand slipped into mine, warm and steady. "My fiancé." His mother's eyes widened in surprise, then softened into joy so quickly it made my chest ache. She pulled me into a hug without hesitation, her voice trembling slightly. "Welcome to the family, dear." I was starting to think I'd never get to meet the one who tamed him. I laughed nervously, but Ethan squeezed my hand once. A silent, "You're doing fine." His dad shook my hand firmly, studying me with sharp eyes, that still somehow held warmth. "He's lucky, you know," he said, nodding toward Ethan. "Don't let him forget it." The weekend unfolded like a dance I hadn't rehearsed for, but somehow knew the steps, too. We cooked together, shared stories around the fire pit, even took a slow walk along the property line, while his parents reminisced about raising Ethan near the ocean. I played my part, smiling, leaning into Ethan's arm when his mother asked how we met, laughing at a story about him falling out of a tree when he was 8. It should have felt fake, but it didn't. The way he looked at me, steady and warm, made it feel alarmingly real. On the second night after his parents had gone to bed, I sat on the porch staring at the stars. Ethan joined me, handing over a cup of tea. "You were amazing today," he said softly. "They haven't smiled like that in a long time." "It's not hard to like them," I said, cradling the warm mug. "They're good people." He nodded quiet for a while. "You remind me of what home used to feel like." The word settled in my chest, heavy and light all at once. I looked at him, really looked, and for a moment I forgot we were pretending. His hand was resting next to mine on the porch railing, close enough that I could feel the heat from his skin. I pulled back before it went too far. This was temporary. It had to be. The next morning his mom gave me a gift, a soft hand-knitted scarf in shades of cream and gray. "I made this last winter, not knowing who it was for," she said, smiling. "Now I do." Something inside me cracked. No one outside my mom, well, before everything went wrong, had ever made me something by hand. I hugged her, hiding the sting in my eyes. When they finally drove away Sunday afternoon, waving until the car disappeared down the road, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "You okay?" Ethan asked. I nodded, clutching the scarf. "Yeah, they're wonderful." "They loved you," he said simply, watching me with that unreadable expression again. And for the briefest moment I wished it wasn't pretend. I wished every word I had said, every look we'd shared was real. But wishes are dangerous things. The house felt too quiet after his parents left, like their warmth had lingered in the walls, but then slipped out the door with them. I walked into the guest house, still holding the scarf his mother had made, soft and warm against my fingers, and sat on the bed. It had been pretend. Every smile, every touch, every fiancé whispered in front of them. It was all an act, yet my chest ached like I just lost something real. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the way Ethan had looked at me when his mom hugged me, the way his fingers brushed mine when we'd reached for the same coffee mug. He was kind, steady, safe, and I was falling for him hard. But people like me didn't get to fall for people like him. I'd been a runaway, a girl with no family to introduce, no grand plan for the future. He was successful, established, the kind of man who had options, and I was just the option that happened to be convenient. The next morning, I made a decision. When Ethan came down for coffee, I was already at the counter, bag packed, and Lai's leash in my hand, his brow furrowed instantly. "Going somewhere?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, I think it's time. You've done so much for me, Ethan, more than anyone has in a long time. But I can't keep staying here. I don't belong." He stared, stunned silent for a second. "You don't belong, Jenna. Where is this coming from?" I swallowed hard, gripping the leash tighter. "You don't need me. You just wanted a fake fiancé for a weekend, and I let myself believe it was more. That's my mistake, not yours." His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed even. "Is that really what you think? That you were some prop?" "What else would it be?" I whispered. He stepped closer, his eyes searching mine. "Do you have any idea what you've done since you walked into my life? This house used to be silent. I came home every night to empty rooms and noise only from the fridge running. And then you showed up with a stray dog and a sketchbook, and suddenly it felt like home again. I blinked, startled. Ethan, no, you need to hear this. His voice softened deep and rough all at once. When I asked you to pretend, it wasn't because I needed a lie. It was because I wanted my parents to see what I've started to feel, even if I couldn't say it yet. You weren't a stand-in. You were you. Something inside me cracked open. I hadn't realized how badly I needed someone to choose me. Not for what I could do, not for what I could give, but just for being me. I felt the sting in my eyes before the tears fell. Why would you care about someone like me? He reached up, gently brushing his thumb against my cheek to catch a tear. Because you're stronger than you think, Jenna. You walked away from a life that crushed you, and you're still standing. You make art out of pain. You care about every living thing you touch, even strays like me. That made me laugh through the tears, and he smiled soft and crooked like he hadn't done that in years. Please don't go, he said quietly. Not because I need help in this house. Not because of some fake story. Stay because I don't want this us to end. The word us landed like sunlight after rain, warm and startling. I dropped the leash and stepped closer, the scarf still clutched in my hand. Okay, I whispered, barely audible. I'll stay. Lucky barked once, as if sealing the deal, and Ethan laughed, a real laugh, deep and unguarded. Then he pulled me into his arms, slow and certain, like he was afraid to break the moment. For the first time in years, I wasn't running from something. I was running towards someone. 3 months later, the guest house wasn't a guest house anymore. It was home. My clothes hung neatly in the closet. Lucky had his own bed by the window, and my sketchbook collection had doubled, then tripled, until I had to buy a shelf just to hold them all. Ethan's parents visited more often now. Each time his mother hugged me, like I'd always been hers, slipping another homemade scarf or a jar of her peach jam into my hands. His dad teased Ethan about finally growing up, but every word dripped with pride. They didn't look at me like I was pretending anymore, because I wasn't, and neither was Ethan. We were still learning each other, still figuring out what it meant to be two people from different worlds, choosing the same path. But there was no pretending in the way he reached for my hand at the grocery store, or the way his eyes softened every time I laughed, or how he sat quietly on the porch while I sketched, like he didn't want to disturb a sacred moment. One crisp Saturday morning, he told me to dress nicely, just something comfortable, he said, grinning like he was keeping a secret. I followed him to a small building in town with a scent of oil paints, and paper hung thick in the air. It was an art gallery. My art gallery. He'd spoken to the owner weeks ago, showing her my sketches without telling me. Now they hung on the walls, Lucky curled on the porch, the forest mist behind the guest house. Ethan himself leaning against the railing with that thoughtful expression he always tried to hide. My throat tightened as people walked around, studying them, pointing out their favorites. Ethan, I can't believe you did this. You deserve it, he said simply, standing behind me, his hand warm on my shoulder. You gave this place life again. Let people see what you see. That afternoon, a woman bought one of my drawings, a simple pencil sketch of the guest house. I stood there in shock as she handed over the check, whispering, "There's so much peace in it. It feels like home." Home? That word used to feel dangerous to me, like something that could vanish without warning. But now it felt steady, like roots finally finding soil. Later, after everyone left, I stood in front of one last piece, the one Ethan had secretly convinced me to finish for the opening. It showed all of us together, Ethan, his parents, Lucky at our feet, and me, smiling in a way I hadn't known I could. I traced the edge of the frame with my fingertips, heartful. "I think I'm finally done running," I said softly. Ethan stepped beside me, slipping an arm around my waist. "Good," he murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of my head, "because I wasn't planning to let you anyway." I leaned into him, the smell of cedar and coffee wrapping around me like the scarf his mother had made, and smiled. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't wondering where I belonged. I already knew I belonged here with Ethan, with Lucky, with a life I'd built from the ashes of everything I'd lost. And it was just the beginning.